All right, so it looks like everybody who currently has tried to join us has joined us. So we are excited that you're here. You should see on your screen the agenda for today. So we're going to spend a few minutes introducing ourselves. Some of you may be new to the Alabama Instructional Design Network. Some of you, like I said, may be our friends from Florida who are here. So we'll spend a few minutes updating you on who we are and where we are. And we're going to have an exciting networking opportunity so that those of us in Alabama and those of us visiting from Florida and other places have an opportunity to talk. We've already had some great exchange of resources that was part of our members only meeting this morning. So if you were not able to attend that, I hope that you will consider joining AIDN and being able to participate in more of our members only events that will come up. Let's talk a little bit about who we are. So we are a nonprofit professional organization that seeks to help instructional designers throughout the state and other states, wherever we can, become more connected with other instructional designers, to share resources, to learn more about the science and the art of being an instructional designer. We have been around for 3 years, and we started because a couple of people, instructional designers in the Birmingham area, came together and said we would love to be able to network and share resources. And so we got together and figured out a way to do that. And it became an entire organization and network. So we have officially been filed. We are recognized from the state, by the state of Alabama and the federal government, as being a nonprofit. That means that if you are so inclined, you can give us a tax-deductible donation. I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves so that I can get my puppy under control. So, Catherine, if you want to jump in and introduce yourselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Catherine Jarnigan, and I am an instructional designer at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. Prior to that, I was actually an ESL teacher. And so I come from an educational background, and then shifted from that to an LMS admin and then into instructional design. So like Courtney Felton was saying, I am also one of the board members and co-founders of AIDN, and we are so excited for all of you to be here and be able to come together and network. So all of our AIDN members and non-members in Alabama, and also our Florida friends today. And I serve as the vice president of AIDN.
Sarah, while she's working out her technical difficulties, she is our secretary. I didn't really introduce myself. My name is Courtney Felton. I am the president and one of the founding members, like Catherine said, board members of AIDN. I started out in secondary education, moved in, got my master's degree in instructional design, moved into instructional design and worked in higher education for about a decade. And then I recently transitioned into corporate instructional design. So I am now a learning and development specialist for National Vision, which is headquartered in Atlanta, but I currently live in Birmingham. So if we don't have Sarah back, Crystal, if you want to introduce yourself next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal Butler. I am also one of the founding board members of AIDN, and I'm currently serving as the treasurer. I'm a senior instructional designer at UA in Tuscaloosa. I've been in that position about 5 years. Before that, I was an academic librarian. Before that, I was a legal secretary. I've held a number of roles over the years. I taught math for about a year. But instructional design is clearly my calling, and I'm really proud to be part of this organization.
All right, thank you, Crystal. My name is Rayanne Bailey. I am the marketing coordinator for AIDN, and currently I am the administrative systems instructor at UAB for financial affairs. And prior to coming to UAB, I was a software trainer for a medical and healthcare IT company.
Morning, everybody. I am Dawn Dunaway. I'm AIDN's events coordinator. I am also the instructional designer for Gadsden State Community College. And I also am a facilitator for Quality Matters workshops. So I'm very happy to be a part of this organization. I really enjoy learning from everyone, and I'm really happy you're all here. Welcome.
Good morning. My name is Courtney Garza, and I am a founding board member of AIDN and also currently serving as the membership coordinator. And I have spent most of my career in education in some way. So I started out as a teacher, transitioned to financial aid at the University of Alabama, where I got my master's in interactive technology. And now I am an instructional designer for the School of Health Professions at UAB. So happy to have you all here. Speaking of membership, I think that's what we're going to talk about next. So we've already mentioned before, we are a fairly new organization, but we do now have paid memberships available. And we're definitely always thinking of new benefits to offer our members. But here we just wanted you to see what types of memberships are available. So obviously for in-state members, but we do also welcome out-of-state members. If those of you would like to join, we do have some student members as well as supporting members. So even if you know someone who's not an instructional designer, but supports your department and think that they might want to be a member of this organization as well to be updated on the latest and greatest in instructional design, they're welcome to join. Of course, the different classifications do come with different benefits as well. So you can see all of that here. And as we mentioned, because this is our inaugural year for membership, for membership dues, they are all the same this year. So this year only, all members will pay $35. And so once you complete a membership form, you'll receive an invoice. And then once that invoice is paid, then you can participate in any of our members only events. And we will definitely talk a little bit more about that. And if you can go to the next slide, Courtney.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Rayanne has also shared in the chat our form. If you're interested in becoming a member and you're not yet a member, she has put that in the chat. So you just click that, fill that out, and then you'll be sent an invoice to be able to pay. And we do, Courtney, we've had some organizations that have paid for membership as well, correct?
That is correct. Thank you for that reminder. So yes, you may be able to get your organization to cover those dues for you. I was able to do that here at UAB. I know some other people in my department have as well. And I know we've had at least one other institution that was willing to do that. That might require us to complete some additional paperwork for you. So if that is the case, just send it to our AIDN email and we will be happy to get that completed. Rayanne dropped our email address in the chat as well. So you can send anything that you need us to complete there. We have created some merchandise. Right now, it's just with our logo. We do want to expand that at some point, but if you are interested in purchasing any of that, you can do that on Redbubble. But because we are trying to get people interested, Courtney has her travel mug here. My mug is in the kitchen. I should have grabbed it. But, oh, thank you. Thanks, Catherine. But we do also want to celebrate our growing membership. We are really excited about how many members we have right now and that it is continuing to grow. And so to celebrate that, we're going to be giving away some free merchandise. And this will go to our 50th member and our 100th member. We are getting very, very close to 50 members. I won't share that number, but it's close. So.
As in we could reach it today if we have under 5 people join today. So you could be a lucky one. Okay, so we'll take a moment. If you have any questions about joining AIDN, we want to mention that we will have First Friday events beginning November 5th on our members only Facebook page. So if you haven't joined and you're curious as to what being a member will get you, we had a members only event this morning that was for our members, as well as some members of the Florida Instructional Design Network, where we had presenters from TopKit come and explain what TopKit is. We had some great resources shared. So we will have opportunities like that for members only attached to our events, as well as some standalone events. And one of those things will be the First Friday events that will take place in a members only Facebook group. Our first one is going to be November 5th. They will all be on Friday. They will all be at noon to keep in sync with our summer series sessions, because that noon time on Friday seems to work well for most people. If we need to adjust that later because people are having a hard time attending, then we welcome that feedback. But we will have some targeted topics to help people who are new to instructional design, who may have come into instructional design through a career path. I've met more and more people who became instructional designers because they were in training and became trainers because they were good at what they did. And so they kind of fell into the instructional design path and are looking for more of an understanding of instructional design fundamentals. We've talked with Tom too from Florida in the Florida Instructional Design Network, and he finds the same thing in Florida. So all over the place, we see that people are more and more coming into instructional design from a non-traditional path. And we want to help our members get that foundation that they need in order to be improve their practice of instructional design. So we will have some events for our members that help with that. So we've had people express interest in learning more about universal design after one of our summer series presentations. So that will be our first First Friday event on November 5th at noon. We will go live in our members only Facebook group, and I will walk people through what instructional design is. We'll talk about it. What universal design is. We will talk about it from an instructional design standpoint in terms of research and the science behind it, and really get into some more specific information that is directly tied to instructional design, and then how you can help your subject matter experts, your faculty, if you're in higher ed, incorporate that more into higher ed training, but also corporate training, because it does have a place in the corporate world as well. So we'll include all of that. And then in December, we will have just a networking event where people can come and talk, and we'll do some networking activities to give people an opportunity to get to know each other, talk about the things that are interesting to them, and just become more of a community. So we definitely encourage you to join if you have not already. And we'll have more events coming. So we have a couple of things planned. Sarah is also, and unfortunately, I don't see that she's been able to get back on. She's having some computer issues. But Sarah has been working on putting together a survey so that we can get more of an idea of what our members are wanting to hear and receive from their membership in this organization. So we will find out more about that and then tailor our resources to that. So I'll give us just a minute for anybody to have any questions, who have any questions about that, to drop that in chat. And then we will get ready for our first presentation of the morning. So our first presentation this morning is by Brandy Rhodes. And so I will introduce her, and then I will stop sharing my screen and let her share hers. And we'll be hearing about instructional design for non-instructional design educators, and bridging the gap to form partnerships. So to give you some information about Brandy, she graduated with a Master's of Science in Instructional Design and Development from the University of South Alabama in 2019. Go Jags. That's also where I got, well, my undergraduate and my Master's in Instructional Design. She is currently pursuing her PhD in instructional design and development from South Alabama. She has a prior bachelor and master's degree in prior field, and she currently lives in Fairhope, Alabama with her husband and her 8-year-old daughters and her 7 animal babies. All right, so with that, Brandy, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share yours.
Like you said, the name of the presentation, the name that I gave the presentation is Helping Non-ID Educators. Basically because when I was trying to think of a topic to talk about for this talk, it was sort of all over the place. There's a lot of topics in instructional design, and there's a lot of things that kind of fall under the umbrella of instructional design. So it sort of makes it hard to find something that really can resonate with kind of a diverse group of people who do instructional design or somehow do those types of projects. So over the last few years of kind of learning instructional design through classes and courses through the university, and then doing those projects, something that kind of comes up for me over and over, regardless of the type of project we're doing, the scale of project we're doing, or who we're working with, is the language, the jargon. And so what I mean by that is it keeps showing up in both personal and professional settings. So I think it's really easy when you get into a profession to forget how specific the language and the jargon in that industry really is. And so we get really used to talking to people, you know, for me in classes or when I'm doing a project with other instructional design people, or even when I'm on professional networking sites or LinkedIn where I connect with other instructional design related people. So we sort of get used to speaking this lingo and this jargon all of the time. So I think that might end up occasionally being a barrier to people who are not in that world. So I really do believe that instructional design and instructional designers can be incredibly helpful partners for educators or even business clients, depending on where you work. But I do, again, think that the jargon that we use might actually be a barrier to that partnership potential. So it's not just instructional design either. So it's kind of everywhere. If you'll notice, every industry has their own jargon. So I wanted to give you an example from my other background, which is healthcare. So I'm going to change my slide here. So imagine that you're getting ready to have surgery. And so the surgeon has come in and talked to you. You've talked to the surgery nurses. Everybody's done their part. Well, then an anesthesia professional comes in to speak to you. They do their physical exam. They ask you a lot of questions. And then they in turn ask you, do you have any questions? Well, you're a little confused and you want to know more about anesthesia. Like, what does that mean? So they answer with this. They say, we're going to use several medications, including inhaled anesthetic agents. These work differently at different levels. At the spinal cord level, these agents decrease transmission of noxious afferent information ascending from the spinal cord to the cerebral cortex by the thalamus, thereby decreasing supraspinal arousal. This is also an inhibition of spinal efferent neuronal activity, reducing the movement and response to pain. So you can see how that, unless you're in that world, that's very confusing. So this would be an alternative response. They could say, I will be using a combination of medications that will put you in a sleep-like state. I'll give you these through your IV, and there will also be some that you breathe in. And then it says, when surgery is complete, I'm going to reverse those medications and wake you up. So if you can look at that, really, which one of those would you prefer? I would say most people would prefer the everyday language instead of the very industry-specific jargon. So my point on this is that every single field and every single person has their own unique set of knowledges, experiences, and different languages that go with those. And instructional design is no different. So what I wanted to do is kind of walk you through a little bit more about my history. And what I think this will help you see is kind of how this played out for me in real life and why this has been important. Sorry. So I'm calling this kind of my professional journey, or you'll see how I kind of affectionately call that my epiphany timeline. So 17 years ago, back in 2004, I would consider that my first professional role. I'd worked before, but my first professional role, and that was as a registered nurse. So I went to school to be a nurse. And then throughout those years, I worked in the emergency department. And then I went back to school to become a nurse practitioner. And if you don't know the difference, basically think of it as nurse practitioners actually go back to school to learn how to diagnose and actually treat patients, sort of what you would think of most physicians do. So very similar kind of role. And so I did that for many years. And then in 2016, I actually began teaching at the University of South Alabama in an area called simulation. Simulation is where we kind of put on hands-on clinical skills training events. There's various colleges that use simulation as part of their curriculum, the medical students, nurse practitioner students, physician assistant students. Anyway, so we have a variety of people that come in there. And what was really exciting for me is after years of kind of working in hands-on, healthcare in that field, I was actually in the education space. And I always thought that I'd wanted to work in the education space, but this really kind of sealed it for me. I loved being in that environment. And regardless of what topic we were studying, which didn't really seem to be that as important to me, I really liked the challenge of taking something big and really breaking it down and explaining it. And I also really loved that feeling and that interaction when the students really seemed to get it, when you use just the right words or just the right way to explain it to them. So I found that really satisfying. So that sort of led me kind of on a hunt to look for, another type of degree or some more training around specifically that. And luckily, USA, the University of South Alabama, has an instructional design program. And so in 2017, I started that program. So, and I've loved all of the coursework ever since that. So what's interesting and why I'm bringing this up is along these last several years since I started in instructional design, learning that and doing projects using instructional design models and methods and all of those things is, when you get excited about something, you really want to share it with other people. You want to tell everybody about it. And so for me in that healthcare education space, I kept sort of like trying to bring it up, and I would ask them, do you want me to do a project for you if you guys ever want to do anything? And I really didn't get a lot of feedback on that. And over time of that happening, sending texts and emails and kind of bringing it up, it really started to kind of get me down. I didn't understand why no one seemed to be as interested in it as I did. So cut down to 2020 when I was looking for a larger project to do for a PhD internship project. And I actually was able to land a project with an anesthesia professor. What had happened is they had a master's program that had recently been accredited to turn into a doctorate program. And so before starting to work with this professor, I sent over multiple documents, things about what all we were going to do together, things like instructional analysis, problem analysis, all these different words we use in instructional designs. I even sent over a little contract of what we do together, sort of a list of like deliverables, all the things that we learn in instructional design that we do. At the time I thought, oh, I'm being very professional. This sounds very legitimate. And then upon our first meeting, I realized very quickly that she had no idea what I was talking about. So I kind of vowed then and there that from that point forward, when I was working with people who weren't specifically instructional design, that I would try my hardest to create things using language that everybody else would most likely understand. And so I would always take the time to sort of use that language. And then as we would go through the project, then I could maybe kind of sprinkle in some of the other jargon and say, well, we kind of call it this word, but this is actually what it is. And so sort of teaching along the way, but not going overboard on that. So that project was really a success. And what was really exciting about that is after the project was over, sometime afterwards, I had communication with this professor, and she would tell me that since our work together, that she actually got excited about trying to find more things about instructional design. Now the things that her university offered revolving around like teaching and online learning or anything in that instructional design world, now that she had more familiarity with it, she was more excited about it. So that really made me excited, made me really realize that there is kind of this gap between what we say and what we know and what they say and what they know. And I really do think they could be beneficial to each other. I think it's just more of a jargon or language barrier. So what was I going to say? Let me find my place. So again, the point of the story is I really do think that the majority of educators or other professionals, I believe they really do want to do a good job. And I think most people are open to seeing better ways of doing that or getting the help that they need, but they really can't get that help if they don't know what we do, or if we keep using language that's unfamiliar to people outside of instructional design. So what I want to do next. So kind of the goal moving forward for the rest of this is to really get you to consider removing a lot of your ID specific jargon when you're working with educators or clients of any type, and trying to restate those in jargon or language that everybody knows. And this, I think, will help make processes visible and understandable. And I think this will also really help personalize this process for the people that you're helping. So what might this look like? I wanted to give you some examples of, this particular project that I just spoke of, some examples of how we could take things that we typically use that are very filled with jargon and really kind of make them more with everyday language. So, for example, this is a model that we learned in our instructional design program. It doesn't matter the model. This is just one that we sort of learned at the beginning. I think most instructional designers will either take this model and use combinations of other models, or they'll add things to this, pieces and parts. And so, but the point is, the language on here are things like instructional analysis, learner analysis, developing assessment instruments. So I don't really think that most people outside of our world or the instructional design world always know exactly what you mean when you say this. And so I do like visuals when working with people. I think it's very helpful. So what I did was I created sort of an alternative model kind of based off of this same Dick and Carey model, but I tried to use words that people would more likely understand. So instead of instructional analysis, I put break down your content. Right? And so instead of using the word assessments, I put decide how you will check knowledge, because I think most people would understand sort of what you mean. And then once you get into that, then you can kind of teach them what that looks like. So next, sort of within each of these phases, I think you could go even further. So here's a list version also. If you don't like the graphic, this is a list version that you would also give the people that you're working with, just to kind of let them see that we're going to be going through some specific steps or phases, and just to get an idea of where this is going to lead. So here, this was an example kind of we were trying to get clear on their instructional goal here. And so what she handed me over, what she gave me was this large course objective and all of these very, highly technical kind of learning outcomes. And what I wanted to do here is kind of help her understand how to kind of make a very simplified goal, because before we can move forward, we really need to get clear on what we need the students to be able to do. And we know that through instructional design, we look at sort of performance-based kind of objectives. So I wanted to get her thinking about what exactly is it that you, out of all of this language here, what do you want the students to be able to do? What's important for a nurse anesthetist to be able to do? And so we kind of worked through that in listing her course goals, and we kind of simplified it and got it down to this. So basically the gist is that these students need to be able to understand how different diseases impact anesthesia. And so that was kind of the gist. So that really helped us simplify this and get it to where we could break it down into the next pieces. And so one of the things, so a learner analysis, right? That's a big kind of fancy word. So I put consider your student, or you could put consider your audience. And I put a day in the life here because I think most people know what a day in the life means. And so instead of trying to initially break down and ask her all of the things that she wanted them to be able to do, I asked her to sort of go through the day in the life of what it looks like as a nurse anesthetist. Like you enter a surgical area, what happens? And we went really kind of piece by piece. And what happened here was she was able to just tell me a story, and she could very clearly visualize what it looked like to be in that day. instead of us going down maybe a list of, analysis type things that you might get from maybe a textbook or something like that. So let me get to where I am here. So next, so this kind of helped us break down these things. So she was able to tell me they kind of review the order, they identify the diseases that they need to look for, they could explain the effects that anesthesia has on managing that, they create their plan, and then they evaluate. So again, then that kind of broke that down into what happens next. So this was sort of our content analysis, but here it was breaking down the content. Instead of saying this is your instructional analysis, this is just breaking down the content. And so I like that language much better when working with people. And so working with somebody who's from healthcare, I think it was very easy for her to understand what I was saying. And so I do want to say here, let me go back. The thing to remember is most of the time, especially if you're in higher education or any kind of other setting, the other person is usually very competent and expert in their own field. And so you're not dealing with someone who just doesn't have any general sense of anything. They're usually very highly educated, highly, established people. And so you still need to break that language down, I think, for them to understand what you're talking about. So this one, I put this as a nuance because on most instructional design models, or at least the ones that, we sort of learned and used and the ones I've adapted, they don't specifically list assigning learning levels as one of the main phases, but it is really important. But again, going back to not overloading somebody who's initially learning about instructional design with a lot of jargon is when you're assigning learning levels, we learn to use things like taxonomies and all of those big types of words. And they're important to help us kind of understand what level of outcome that we're looking for in the learning. But for this professor, instead of doing that, I came up with a star system, kind of a 1 to 5 stars of levels. And the reason I did that is because it was much easier for us. This is just one small set of conditions that her and I had to go through that their class was going to have to cover in the course of a semester. And so each one, of course, doesn't have the same level of importance. So of course we went through, so like 1 star was just basically they had to be able to just read over it. 2 stars was kind of like memorize it, be able to recognize it on a test, all the way up to 5 stars, which was life or death, know this back and forth. This will 100% be a question on your professional board exams. And so to her and I, that was much easier to just run through this very, very long list of multiple conditions and her assign a value to that. And then once I was away from, her and doing this on my own, then I would understand at what level we needed to do the rest of the steps, because this told me kind of, I could use taxonomies. I didn't necessarily need her to be able to do that. So that was just a little nuance that I put there. So writing objectives, I don't have a lot to add on this one, just that you can really kind of help people write objectives. You can do a 3-part example and just kind of teach them this, or there are other ones, there's 5-part objectives and so forth. But again, help them kind of break that down, but use your everyday language. So next, assessment. So this one in particular, I really encourage people to use a different word here, even though this is kind of a common one that was on some of our instructional design models. So when you say checking their knowledge, first of all, I think that's much easier to understand. And also, I think sometimes when you use the word assessment, it seems to imply that the only way to test someone's knowledge is through test, like specifically test, versus other things that we know can test knowledge, such as like presentations or quizzes or projects or, demonstrations or even discussions. So that's another reason I don't really like this word. And then healthcare specifically, which is kind of a world that I've operated in the past, is assessment to a medical person usually means either their physical exam, like when somebody's listening to you, your heart and your lungs and doing all that stuff, they will usually call that their assessment, or nurses do. And then your healthcare providers, your doctors, your nurse practitioners, like myself, will even use assessment as in like, that's my diagnosis or my assessment of the situation. So I think you have to be careful using that terminology. So I seem to prefer the check their knowledge sort of verbiage. And so what's helpful about this too is next is another thing you can use is sort of a table like this in one of our classes. They call this a task objective assessment blueprint. You guys probably have your own version. But basically, this is kind of where you start to teach them how everything is aligned. And it uses what you've already done with them, right? So you can show them the task, or, for her, it was a condition that she picked out. And I can show her how the number of stars here that she decided on really determined the learning level, which then helped me pick an objective that was based on that learning level. So we would use words like explain, going back to taxonomies and learning levels. And then again, how assessments, which was the word from before, or I could have put knowledge here, goes here to show you that there are different ways of checking that other than just test. So next, let's see. So teaching and learning strategies here, I don't know if everybody uses that same terminology. So teaching or learning strategies. So for me, what I found was really helpful for her was to just have a list of a lot of different strategies that you could use. And they kind of walk through those based on your learning levels and kind of help them see like that there are different ways to go about doing the same thing. There's not one particular way. The point is it going to be able to help them learn what they need to learn and do what they need to be able to do? So I think that you can get creative in how you do that, but still keep it very simplified. Let's see. So this one's interesting because creating or selecting teaching materials by nature, in the higher education setting specifically, and most people in general who are adult professionals, everybody's very busy. And I remember having such an epiphany when we were first learning about instructional design, because in my mind, when you tell people to create learning materials, it seems to imply that they have to personally create everything. And so using that word selecting, or selecting existing teaching materials was really helpful for me, because I remember thinking, wow, then you really don't have to make everything. And so what we did with this particular project that I'm talking about is we were able to find some particular materials that she already had existing that were going to perfectly satisfy what she was wanting. Now that we've gone through all the other stages, she had a lot more clarity around what she needed. And being very busy and somebody who manages multiple classes like she was, it was sort of an excitement, moment for her too, that she didn't have to create everything from scratch. So next, so evaluations. Again, on this one, I think that you can really open their eyes. So there's a lot of different ways to do evaluations. I know in a lot of the instructional design models, they'll separate it out between summative and formative evaluations. I'm not sure that everybody uses that verbiage. They might, but I'm not sure if they do. So I think you can, again, just kind of break this down into telling them you just want to see if the students are learning, and you can do it throughout. And then there's lots of creative ways to do this. So extras. Okay, so this one's the fun part for me. So extra things that, again, goes kind of back to kind of the thesis of this whole thing of like jargon and language and really trying to personalize this for the person that you're working with is whenever I got done with the project, or whenever I've gotten done with the project, what I really try to do is think about what that person needs to move forward. And inevitably, there's always something left that they're going to have to do that I can't do for them. So if they need to make up a very specific test or a lecture that they want to do that day that I can't, do for them. And so what I do is send them just a very simple bulleted list, a checklist of things that are, these are your to-dos. And the next thing is I send them a list of things that says, these are the things that you have. This is you can call it assets. Some people say deliverables, but she didn't know what I meant when I said that until I had to explain it to her. So again, so making a list of what all they have. And then also a design document. So again, this one's really important when it comes to language. So the course that we built together, this anesthesia course, wasn't going to be actually taught until a semester or two later. And so I wanted to be able to write up everything that we did from the very beginning, all the rationales for all the decisions that we made, our learning levels, everything that I sort of just kind of walked you through a little bit of. I wanted her to be able to go back that much time away and really see and remember why we did what we did. And then also was the chance that someone else would end up teaching that course. And I wanted that person to be able to step in without have gone through that process with me and understand, why we did what we did, what we came up with, what her preferences were. And so for design documents, or whatever you call them on the instructional design document, I would really be careful not to use any overly instructional design words. So also with headings. So use the headings that we used in the phases or whatever phases that you use, ones that that person can recognize, one that they understand, even the language within it to do that. If you want one that's more formal, which I typically will make one for myself, that's what I would do. I would make one for you that has the formal language in case you want to use it for maybe a future project, or maybe to show off your portfolio to somebody in the future for an instructional design job, or if you're trying to propose a project. If you want that more formal language, make that one for you. But I would make one removing all of that formal language and jargon that you could give to this person who's not an instructional design person, who can read it at any time and understand everything that you guys did together. And then lastly, that kind of goes into also, I always ask someone at the end of the project, how do you want this packaged? And what I mean by this is everybody kind of has their own comfort level with technology and where they want things stored. Some people use Google Documents. Some people just like to save them on their home computer. Some people like zip files. People like all sorts of things. But you've got to remember that this is for them, and you want whatever's going to be easy for them to be able to come back again at any time and date and know what those documents are, where to find them, how to easily navigate through it all. So again, I always like to ask people how they want things packaged. Go back. So kind of the recap of everything is, again, instructional design is its own world. It's got its own jargon, its own processes, and this is like any other field out there. I mean, you really have to think about everywhere that you go, even throughout your non-professional life, to the car shop or a football party, or when people talk politics. I mean, everybody knows everything differently. And so you really got to keep that in mind when you're working with people in your professional life, that even if they're very smart, intelligent people, their expertise is usually very industry specific, and it doesn't necessarily include instructional design language. I really do think that instructional designers can be very helpful to educators. And I really think that if we can't kind of bridge that gap for them between what we do and what they need, that it's going to continue to be an issue of being undervalued or underutilized. And so again, in my own example of not understanding why many of the people in the healthcare space weren't more interested in what I was doing, it was very enlightening for me to learn that they just didn't know what I was talking about. And it was as simple as that. This here is something I just wanted to list. These are kind of my 5 things I want to say that I think that instructional designers really bring to the table for other people. And so they really do bring a lot of clarity. So by using techniques in each of the phases of instructional design from the very beginning, you help people get really clear on their goals and their trainings. And this kind of sets the stage for the entire project. I think it really helps kind of remove the fuzziness for people. And I think if you did this alone for someone, that could probably stand on its own. So clarity is a huge thing instructional designers can bring to a project. Also bringing order to chaos. Because we're very systematic and very strategic, and we use a lot of structured processes, you can take a large amount of disordered content and make it properly chunked and organized and sequenced. And I think this kind of eliminates a lot of the fumbling around for most people of the where do I start? You know, a lot of people don't know where they start. And by being able to bring that order to chaos, I think you take people who are very busy. And I think that this is very critical. And I think it's very much appreciated when they actually get this experience. A personalized experience. Well, what I like about this is with instructional design, you kind of have a built-in emphasis on making sure that they know about their students. And this also becomes important for customizing the course so it perfectly fits their needs. This includes understanding their motivations, their knowledge on the topics. All of these things are very important for adult learning. So I think it's nice that you're able to do that for them. Alignment, this one is huge. So most educators, again, they care about what they're doing. They want to do a good job. And so doing a good job in education implies that you're preparing the students for the task at hand and that they're going to achieve their goals. And without proper alignment of these goals with the course content, with your types of knowledge assessment practices and all your strategies, I think students will walk away feeling very frustrated and unprepared to know what they need to do. And instructional design really ensures this alignment. And so I think this is a big benefit of instructional design to education and businesses. Also, I think it's really nice that you're able to help people kind of share their expertise in a really meaningful way. When learning is well designed, a person gets to share their topic in a personalized and very customized way. Because they're part of that process and their own beliefs and preferences are incorporated into that, it really provides them kind of a personalized platform from which they can teach. So they get to really focus on what matters, connecting with the students, helping them achieve their goals. They get to see themselves more as a mentor and a guide, and they're not constantly having to troubleshoot issues that come up when you don't take the time to actually do a well-designed course. So I think that's probably one of my favorites, things that I've gotten to do with other professors, is to really help them feel like they have something very personalized, very customized. And so they get to spend the majority of their time really teaching in that very meaningful way. So to me, this list is one, again, that can really help you explain what instructional designers do for other people. I think it's a great discussion point so that you can have with potential educators and clients. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. This was really insightful. I found a lot of similar problems, especially with using words like objectives and things like that. So trying to get them to just think about their goals. So it got to the point where when I was meeting with faculty for the first time, and even now when I'm meeting with anybody, I would say, what do you want? If your participants walk away knowing 3 or being able to do 3 to 5 things, what are those 3 to 5 things? And then that would end up being the basis for their objectives. And then I would say, okay, how are you going to know that they've done, that they can satisfactorily do those 3 to 5 things before they leave your training, leave your room, leave your class? And then that kind of became assessments. So I love this presentation because I love how we take for granted that, especially given a background in education, we take for granted that people know what objectives are or that they know what assessments are. And so, yeah, I think that this is great, being able to break this down into people to be able to better understand it. So somebody in the chat said, Brandy, what impact have you noticed in terms of faculty participation in your services? I know that getting faculty buy-in for trainings and services is always an issue in our line of work. Faculty are busy and frequently report not having time to attend trainings or ask for services. That's a great, great question. I think we all, as instructional designers, run into.
Yes. This one, for me, I am not a full-time employed by the university as an instructional designer. So my projects have sort of been kind of on the outskirts, but I do think that is a hard sell sometimes. But I think that's kind of goes back to the discussion here, is a lot of times I don't think that instructors always see the value in it. And I think it's because a lot of the processes that we do are kind of invisible to them. And I'd heard that once, that good design is invisible, like you can't see it, but you can feel the difference. And I think that it's really hard, but I think once you get somebody to actually go through that with you, that I do think they value and appreciate it. And so that has been my experience. So I've had to go through and find projects sort of like on the outskirts on my own. And at first I did find that it was sort of hard to keep them motivated on task. They got a lot of competing things that they want to do. But once I was able to say, hey, this is not going to take up a lot of your time. In other words, like, I'm not going to expect you to meet with me 4 hours every single day. I think if you can kind of tell them that. So one of the professors put it this way. He was like, okay, so we're going to meet once in a while, and then you're going to kind of go underground and work on it and then come back to me, which is sort of the way that we have worked. But some of you may have different experiences if you're in that setting all day, every day. Oh, I just saw the repeat customer one. So I've actually had a couple of the professors ask me, can you please send me your pay structure? Because I really would like to do this independently. And this has kind of been an interesting kind of question for me personally. And I've talked about this with some friends, is I do believe that there is a little bit of a challenge because most universities do offer instructional design offerings like teachings and learnings and things like that. So for instance, this anesthesia professor that I'm talking about, she's sort of just now kind of getting interested in it, but it's always been there. But the thing of it is she has to, even now when I speak to her, she has to kind of take time out of her own schedule to then go and learn it, then go and try to implement what she learns. And then when she gets in trouble, like needs to troubleshoot something, then she's got to hunt somebody down, get on their schedule. And so I think there really is an opportunity for people who are sort of like on the outskirts, like myself, of the higher education setting, to sort of maybe offer some of those kind of customized services, because it is sort of a challenge to do this when you have a lot of other things on your plate. So
I think it's
folks who are in
interesting.
that setting or probably understand that more than me. But
And I think it depends on the model, because at UAB, when I was at UAB, we did offer those services one-on-one. And so when I was meeting with faculty, it was very much a, you know what the content is.
Yeah.
Let me guide you in how to set this up to be effective. I don't expect you to know the jargon. I don't expect you to understand, if there are particular questions that you have, I'm happy to answer them. And that's why it's important, I think, for us to be really knowledgeable about education theory and learning theory and how people learn, because in working with faculty, you have to be able to explain it in ways to make them understand, because if they're faculty, then their evaluations are going to be based on trusting you to guide them to the right solution. So they have to understand why they're making those choices, why you're having them make those choices. And so, being able to be conversant in that in a way that is understandable to them. So I love your idea of being able to take what we do and translate it into a way that they understand it. And so if you can make that connection between, you're used to this being used in this sense, that's similar to how we use it in this sense. And, when we're doing that with technology, like I used to do training for technology, and we would have to kind of hide the pedagogy behind teaching technology. Like, hey, I'm going to teach you in Blackboard how to set up a course. And so when you set up a course, you use modules, and we use modules because, and you kind of hide the pedagogy behind explaining the technology. So a lot of that kind of gets brought in together. So Matthew in chat says he tries to incorporate aspects of best practices in ID in the training / tutorial / how-to videos that I produce for faculty in our LMS, kind of sneaking it in there. Exactly. Sometimes we'll prompt them to reach out and ask about those little nuggets and how can they make their courses look more like what they saw in the video. Absolutely. I think definitely being able to show them what you're doing and what it looks like. So they'll go almost in passing, wait a minute, what is that? Can you show me more about that? Can we talk more about that? And being able to troubleshoot their problems, to be able to offer a solution so that you're showing them to the, to be able to show them a solution and then kind of build that relationship. It's also a lot of relationship building. So I've equated instructional design to selling, because you're selling, what you know and what you can do and how you can help them a lot. I would love to hear more of your ideas, Brandy, and also more ideas of people in the chat who have ways that they kind of sneak that in, and ideas for things that they do, or specific situations where they've struggled with being able to do that. And, open it up to everybody else to kind of give some feedback in terms of what they would suggest or what they've tried.
I like the last guy that said he kind of sneaks in the little nuggets in there. And I think that's probably a helpful way to think about it, is because in the end, I always say, like, you got to really see the person behind whatever we're doing. And I think that sometimes in a formal kind of setting, like especially like higher education, everybody's trying to be very formal and, you know, do the right thing and say the right things. And I think sometimes if you could just use everyday words and talk to people like they're people, that I think that you'll have a better chance of, like you say, making those relationships and those connections and getting them to where they feel comfortable asking you questions, because maybe they don't want you to think that they don't know or they don't understand, because they're already an expert and used to being seen as an expert in whatever their field is. Sometimes it's hard to admit what we don't know, that even though we're really an expert at something else, we may not necessarily be an expert at teaching per se, or all of those things. And once we can kind of take down that we're going to judge you or we're going to use words you don't understand kind of barrier, I think that maybe people will open up more, or at least that's been the case for me. I really just try to speak on a normal level. I mean, I could speak the big words, but it doesn't seem to really make that big of a difference for people, honestly.
Right. And so we would have training on the technology, and we would also pair a technologist with a designer. So a designer could be there to say, when you're using this technology, because typically instructional technologists know a lot about what can be done. And I've explained to people the difference between instructional technology and instructional design. And it's overly simplistic, but instructional technology to me is what you can do with technology. Instructional design is what you should do with technology, given that particular situation, given the objectives, the learners, and things like that. So I think pairing that and being able to say, here's how the technology works, and then having a designer who can speak to, and here is how you should handle accessibility. Here is how you should incorporate universal design when you're doing that. Here is how you should set that up to help with flow and accessibility of access and things like that, I think are important. So somebody in chat says, Rayanne says people don't know what they don't know, because people just know, oh, that looks and feels good, and not necessarily how to create that type of course or experience for their learner, especially if they have a wide open LMS. Like I always said that Canvas is aptly named because it is a blank canvas, and you can do so much with it, which can be very overwhelming for people who haven't used that technology before. So I'm just going through comments here. Matthew says a lot of what we're talking about here parallels exactly the challenges faculty face in teaching their students and getting that oh so sweet transfer of knowledge. Exactly. It's the same kind of thing. Teaching is teaching, you know, whether we're teaching faculty one-on-one or teaching groups of faculty, or faculty are teaching other students. It's how can you, and so I like what you said about loving that aspect of instructional design where you're breaking things down so that people can understand it. That was part of my draw to instructional design as well, is that we can have that ability to kind of break things up, and to me that's the challenge, and that's the fun part, is how can I break this down so that this person in front of me can help me, can understand it, and then move forward and being able to explain that to somebody else or do that with something else. So yeah, I think this is very helpful, and I think the more that we can take, and one of the reasons I was drawn to your presentation is because I didn't think about how much jargon is actually jargon until I had been in instructional design for a while, and was like, wow, people really don't know what objectives are. You know, just flat out, if I say the word objective, people really struggle with just the word objective or goal, or, you know, anything like that. And I love your Bloom's levels of adding stars. I think that's such a creative and great idea. I tried to break it down and just say, Matthew says the curse of expertise. Yeah, which is why I think faculty who have been in areas for a long time have a hard time teaching it, because they lose that feeling of what it's like to really not understand something and be at an entry level. But yeah, I used to explain Bloom's as just what is it easier for people cognitively to do and what is more difficult for people cognitively to do, and how difficult does it need to be for this group of students to kind of keep them going. But yeah, it's definitely, and a lot of times it's person by person. So you have some faculty who pick up on it very quickly, and some faculty or some clients who just really struggle with it. That makes it more difficult. So yeah, great points. Thank you so much for sharing this information. We'll give it just another minute to see if there are any other questions or comments that come through. So if you have any more questions for Brandy, please drop them in the chat.
Brandy and Courtney, I actually have a comment. I have been recently designing courses for the education department, and you would think because they are in the education department, they would have the greatest level of understanding of objectives and assessments and alignment and so forth. And I see Courtney shaking her head. It's absolutely true. They are, in my opinion, some of the worst in terms of understanding just the basic pedagogical concepts that all the other departments seem to really understand. And because they are education experts, they are also the hardest to reach sometimes because they assume their level of expertise is so much greater than mine. And we constantly deal with non-measurable objectives, or not understanding what the word assessment means, or like you said, Bloom's. We're all over the place in terms of the level. They're doing the most simple level of objectives for the higher level courses, the graduate level courses, and vice versa. And it amazes me that the people you expect to be the experts are often not at all.
Yeah, it would be really strange to me when I would meet with an education faculty and they would say, oh yeah, I have all of my objectives, and I've been using objectives, and then I would look at their objectives and there are things like understand.
Yes, exactly. Every objective, understand or know
Right.
this or recognize that.
And I understand that though, because like I said, my undergraduate degree was in education and I was a teacher. And when I got into instructional design, into the instructional design master's program, I thought, why didn't they teach me this? Because my education degree was like learning how to instruct without learning how to design. And then I got into instructional design and I was like, this makes so much more sense. And it made my teaching so much better because I had a framework for how to put that information together. And so I was kind of irritated. Like, why don't they teach this to undergraduate education majors? They should know how to, like, they teach you how to do objectives and things like that, but they should teach you some basic instructional design skills.
Absolutely, yeah.
To be a teacher. So Rayanne says, as a software trainer, I learned to use the teach me like I'm 5 method. Yeah, because what seems basic to you as an expert is probably well above the new learner. Absolutely. And I think about the Office with Michael saying, explain that to me like I was 5. Like, talk to me like I was 5. And, we all have that moment. Like, I would work with faculty and they would get into this high level explanation of what something is or does to explain to me what they want their topic, what they wanted their course to be about. And I would be like, explain that to me like I'm 5.
Please
You're
say it in
talking
English.
about neuroscience and neurosurgery. And I'm like, that's a brain. So help me out here. Yeah, Matthew says I always tell tech support to talk to me like I'm 5. Yep, absolutely. Any comments? If anybody wants to unmute and comment as well, feel free. I think that this is a very important topic and something that a lot of instructional designers struggle with. So if anybody has any comments that they would rather make in person rather than having to type, please feel free to do so.
The whole concept of talk to me like I'm 5, I'm thinking we have to do that with our content experts, and that's kind of what Brandy was saying. Like, we expect them to understand our terminology, but we need to talk to them like they're 5 in a certain way, just to make sure they understand what we're trying to get from them.
Yeah, talk to them like they're 5 while treating them like they're the smartest person in the room.
Right.
That's a very delicate balance that we walk.
It's a fine
delicate
line.
balance.
Yes.
I had an associate dean who told me that one time when I was very young in my instructional design career. She said a lot of people want to feel like they're the smartest person in the room. So you have to make them feel like they're the smartest person in the room while really boiling things down to the basics, which is, it's a fun challenge, but man, it can be a challenge.
You have to be a diplomat.
Absolutely. All right. Well,
many of them.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Crystal,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, many of them believe they are the smartest person in the room, regardless of whether you treat them that way or not.
Right.
They
Absolutely.
And they are in terms of their content, but
exactly. They're
but maybe not about
very
other
intelligent people who have gotten very far with what they've done, and do very specialized research and things like that. But when you tell them to write an objective, a whole different conversation. Travis says it's tough because a lot of post-secondary instructors don't have a centralized training pipeline like K-12 instructors do in terms of basic teaching skills and theory. Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're still battling with the whole classic education idea where people think that their job is to teach the way that they were taught, which is to stand in front of the classroom and deliver lectures, and that everybody is just supposed to learn from that. And they don't understand that science and learning theory have taught us, or learning research has taught us so much about why that's not effective and what is effective. And it's not that we're trying to cater to or entertain people because of now we just know that there's more effective ways to educate people, and we're trying to more effectively educate them. So and this is a whole different can of worms, because then we get into how much time do they have based on trying to get tenure when they have to write research grants and manage a whole bunch of other stuff to be able to give them the time that they need to be able to learn and all that. It's a whole other can of worms and whole other difficult topic for people to understand.
Yeah, we run into a lot of kind of institutional issues with the way post-secondary education is structured, where, I mean, like, that's not entirely beyond our scope, but at the same time, it's kind of like, yeah, like you have new adjuncts. A lot of times TAs are getting presented with teaching burdens, especially at state university level, and they get no formal training. And there's a lot of groups. I know at FSU there was the PI Association, I think, at Florida State, and that would try to have like seminars and present, TAs who had teaching obligations, like some level of like working with the LMS or basic pedagogy, but it's always like kind of just the smattering of informal resources. It's whatever this particular instructor manages to get exposed to before they're thrown into the deep end. And it's troubling because you have a kind of system where you have all these parallel obligations and there's very little time left to actually impart like even basic teaching skills.
Yeah, so and often TAs are given, hey, here's my slide deck, I'm going to teach you how to teach, so go teach the slide deck. And so that's kind of the way that they're introduced to it when they're in graduate school or when they're working on their PhD or things like that. Yeah,
and it's nice because a lot of them still manage to pull it in and still deliver their content in innovative ways and still kind of go at it. But there's no kind of again, like I pointed out in the chat, there's no kind of centralized pipeline. Not that that's necessarily a good thing. It won't always teach you the best techniques, but it gives you at least something to start with and some sort of framework to build off of.
Right. And Matthew says, yeah, and the slide decks are text heavy and bullet heavy. Yeah, so even basic down to building a good PowerPoint presentation and how to deliver a good PowerPoint presentation. Those are all topics that can be that can be difficult. And Dawn says sometimes there's zero training for getting courses in the LMS, which is a whole different skill set. Absolutely. You know, they're given something and they have to go into the LMS and try to figure out what to create. And then they bring you what they have once they finally find out that you're there as a resource available and you want to change everything. And they did the best they could with the knowledge that they had. So, and Matthew dropped in the chat, academic slide design. Academicslidedesign.org sounds like a great resource that we can follow up with, can check into later. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we are going to transition away from this. Thank you so much, Brandy. What we are going to do is we're going to take just 5 minutes to give everybody a break. Get some more coffee, get some water, stand up, stretch, breathe, let your dogs out, let your cats in, whatever you need to do. Give us about 5 minutes, and then we're going to do some networking, give people an opportunity to kind of open it up and talk a little bit. So give us about 5 minutes and we'll start again.